Very good. So our next session is called Creative Competence and Skills Needs, and is asking how to develop educational and training programs that are not only relevant, but also resilient to the rapidly changing landscape of the creative sector. Thank you. If everyone can sit down, it would be great. And yeah, Senke and David. So I'm very happy to introduce Senke Sele and David Crombie. Senke Sele is a media theorist. He writes, teaches, and curates on all things linked to a collaborative research project.
Somebody said this earlier.
Seems to come around. You're also the co-founder of XM Lab, and you're also the co-managing director of K8, Institute for Strategische Ästhetik. So German, yeah. Very good. And also with David Crombie. He's the coordinator of Cyanotypes Initiative. He's based in HKU, so you said, yeah, University of the Arts in Utrecht. As the coordinator of Cyanotypes Blueprints for Skills project, and has been involved in European research and innovation projects since Framework Program 4. With a focus on system innovation, object-oriented strategic design issues, and anticipatory innovation trajectories. So, please take the stage.
Thanks. Can we say what we have planned, so you know? Okay, lunch is coming up. All right, so this will be a transition moment from sitting to talking with people and eating. So there'll be a brief introduction into what the Cyanotypes project is, maybe 2-3 sort of conceptual, markers. And then we'll move rooms into a little workshop situation where we're going to ask you, 3 groups, to talk about something related to the project. Does that make sense? So it's not lecture style, but we need to kind of onboard you into the Cyanotypes conversation just briefly, because it's not part of Pacesetters. And David has generously agreed to take on this task of bringing you into the project narrative. So applause.
Thank you very much, Sunku. Welcome to the project narrative. This is the project name and the introductory slide for the project. A cyanotype, for those of you that don't know, is the process whereby you create a blueprint. Cyanotypes is a so-called blueprint project described by the Commission as such. Every industrial sector was allowed to have a project like this, and latterly, finally, the CCI had its chance. I'm going to skip this. So we interpreted this in a slightly different way from other sectors, and we were determined from the beginning we're not going to produce a series of recommendations and reports and leave them on a shelf. We're going to make something which is actually actionable. So we've spent the last 3 years so far doing exactly that. It's a 4-year project. We finish at the end of next year. We kind of see ourselves as a community of change, and we're across the whole sector. And I think this is one of the things that marks this project slightly different. We are required to address the skills needs and ambitions for the whole sector. That means we have to look at higher education, we have to look at vocational education, workplace training, we have to think of lifelong learning. We have to think of all the different types of sectoral organizations that there are. We have to think about policymakers. We have to think about everybody. Not easy. The first year is research. Second year is basically content. The third year is implementing this, and the fourth year is begging the Commission to give us more money. So, cyanotypes. Our argument is that we are all cyanotypes. We are all works in progress. We are all blueprints continuously revised and updated. One of the very important things that mantras that we've followed, this from Citra, the innovation people in Helsinki, future skills are created in ecosystems that have the capacity to renew themselves. So if you work in an organization that's capable of this kind of renewal, you already know this. Most of you don't, I think. They're few and far between. So we recognize the different pressures, the triple transition. We have tried to avoid things like talking about skills gaps. This is a language that we don't really want to pursue or particularly recognize. We're much more thinking about people's ambitions. What do you want to do? Where do you want to be? You're not going to be working in one part of our sector or even in our sector for all your life. You need to move across. So you need to have an understanding, and you need to be able to anticipate change, and you have to be able to exercise some degree of agency in the different contexts that you may find yourselves. So in that sense, it's an anticipatory framework, which we think can help to shape the sector and shape individuals' careers, and for you to find learning paths, whether it's for yourselves, for your organization, or for your sector, or whatever you represent. Sunke will say a few words about in more depth in a minute, but I wanted to mention we've based this framework, which is intended to be transformative, on the concept of competence rather than skills. So we think that if you think about transversal competencies, that's a much more relevant way than very, very specific skills such as you might find in another sector. But interestingly, if you look at the last WEF report from this year, the basic core skills required across all industries in 2030, that's what they say, for all industries for 2030. Most of this is not on any curriculum, but most of it is in this framework, coincidentally. So I just jump forward a little bit to show you a screen that moves a bit quicker than this. Thank you very much. We developed a framework with 5 agency clusters, collective agency, well, whatever. We'll come back to it. And a key point here, that you don't exercise agency in a vacuum. It is shaped by context and your ability to shift across these different contexts. So we're trying to give you the agency to do just that. One of our mantras is around the concept of unlearning, which I think is a rather important one. This was from Alvin Toffler from 50, 60 years ago. Yeah, literally the 21st century will be those who cannot read and write, not who cannot read and write, but cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So it's a tough message sometimes for if you go to learning organizations and you start talking to them about the need to unlearn. But we are convinced this is a missing part, shall we say, of learning algorithms, and especially of how organizations are designed and run. Yeah. Yep, just there.
Just on this topic, okay? How many of you are have some background in systems thinking or cybernetics? Okay, not. So you'll be familiar with this difficulty, of basically saying, I mean, Florian said this earlier, that creativity is not really most usefully understood as the property or a skill of an individual, but as the property of a context, a situation, a system, an architecture, an infrastructure. And of course, people who design technical systems have known this all along, but sometimes the arts and humanities people are behind the curve on that one. In this case, we brought this into the project. This is actually from Bateson, Gregory Bateson, whose daughter is still around promoting this as well. It's very, very basic, is that the first loop is what we do most of the day, is to do what we do as well as we can. Every now and then you bump up against some kind of limitation, you miss a term, you miss a concept, you miss a framework. In the conversations this morning, it was pretty clear how successful Pacesetter has been to me as an outside observer kind of, or guest, general purpose panelist, that you have developed your own vocabulary. Terms like generative, co-generative, etc. were part of almost everybody's conversation. This is a huge achievement. Like this idea of a shared language, of having shared conceptual references, a lot of projects never get there, never. So this is a tremendous achievement, even if it's not a KPI in the project. So I think there's a lot of second loop stuff going on in Pacesetters, obviously, and then the third loop. Are we missing something? This is also where ethics come in. Are we following the right kind of value? The Commission wants us to talk about competitiveness, and by which they mean private value. And we might say, well, what other kinds of values are there? And for instance, that the Commission also wants us to be climate neutral in 20 years, but that's a public value question. A language that Mariana Mazzucato and her colleagues have promoted and amplified, is to say, can we talk about this? Can we talk about how we do this? Creating public goods, creating public value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Our colleagues in the public sector that are trying to hire deep tech talent, AI talent, but really don't have the money to pay for it, are beginning to report back to us is that Gen Z folks
are beginning to become interested in working for the public sector precisely because they want to create public value. This is huge, because we need the public sector to be an innovation agent, innovation partner, which is not the conversation we're having. Red tape, bureaucracy, you guys are standing in the way of innovation, blah, 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 which is also why these three Pacesetters labs are so important. All right, so we have these three loops. Can we go back maybe to the circle once, and then we'll transition to our little workshop setting. While we wait, we reported this back to the commission, and they said, you guys have the wrong terms. All right, because when the commission types in creative agency, they get like a copy shop or like an ad agency or whatever. And our response was, did you ever try to couple the terms agency and learning? And then it takes you right down one of those, matrix-like rabbit holes into a conversation that's been going on in Europe for 100 years. Like the Waldorf, this is the Waldorf, Montessori, Freinet kind of conversation about experiential learning, all of these things. And the funny thing is, once again, our colleagues from tech, so I know some of you are very invested in tech design, not everybody may be, they're having this conversation right now. Why? Because that's the next generation of machines that we're training. We're sending, for instance, I don't know if Jim is here, but we're sending machines into game engines because we think experiential learning is the next frontier of machine learning. We have, if you type in on your connected devices, things like spatial intelligence, and then you go to Substack, you'll find a report actually from this week from a woman who used to work for Google during her sabbatical, and she started a startup called World Labs. And World Labs is an industry leader in spatial intelligence research, because she says the next frontier of AI research is not language models, is world models. So the tech conversation is a Pacesetters conversation, in some sense. Staging, experience design, collective agency. How can we make creativity a property of specific environments and socio-technical ecological systems, and not just ask an individual whether he or she has certain kinds of skills. And so we've come up with these five, what we're going to do in this little workshop thing in a second, we'll just give you a card deck based on these agencies. Then in your group, come up with someone, like it could be one of you in the group, or could be a random persona. Describe a future role you think this person should take 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's our future agency approach. It's not about the gap you have now. Because if you want to get people excited about learning, the last thing you want to do is tell them how deficient they are. That's like, how motivating is that? To say, hey, why don't we talk about all the things you don't know, you can't do, and you don't have the resources for. How are you gonna, nobody will come back after lunch. But if you say, hey, can we talk about a role you want to play 5 years from now, and then design a learning journey that helps you get there. So anticipate this future agency role, and then we'll see what learning might possibly contribute to this. That's this, all right? That's this idea. And if you want, we can go through these different kind of agencies, but we don't have to do that. Maybe we should cut now, leave rooms, and then we'll engage a little bit, okay? And the goal really is, and we were kind of perking up earlier when somebody said, let's stop the kind of implicit productivism of research and even artistic research, and get some measure of balance between what we think is related to innovation, but also what's related to exnovation. Because agency, the conversation on agency, now close with this, very importantly implies a response to the question when not to act. Like, when do we let things happen? What's the role of passivity? Exnovation means, are there processes that we urgently need to get out of? Innovation is like this cumulative thing. We keep adding things, another technology, another stakeholder group. The circle grows wider, and so does the ecological catastrophe. So we need to talk about this. We need to talk about how to get out of things, out of things that are not regenerative. So with that, if somebody knows where the room is that we set up, take us there.